But we start with those pitch invasions. The FA, police and multiple football clubs are now cooperating for the final set of fixtures this weekend to battle the recent rise in pitch invasions.
Earlier this week, Sheffield United player Billy Sharp was headbutted by a Nottingham Forest fan who has now since been jailed. Merseyside police, as well as the FA, are now also investigating Crystal Palace manager Patrick Vieira after his scuffle with an Everton pitch invader was caught on camera. Well, joining us now is the former Met police officer Chris Hobbs and also Janie Frampton, former referee and FIFA instructor. Thank you both very much for joining us. Janie, let's start with you if we can. There is obviously at this point in the season a lot of emotion, pent-up energy and stress. Why are we seeing, though, the behaviour we have done of the last week? Janie.
Can you hear us, Janie?
Happy to come in. Good morning, and it's very sad, the subject we're talking about this morning. I can remember going back to the 70s, 80s, and we had fences around grounds and how awful that situation was then. And as a football fan, I don't ever want to see that coming back. And of course, football is full of emotion. This time of the season, there's really exciting things happening, lots of relief, lots of emotion around promotions and, escaping relegations and playoffs. But why is it we're now getting back to this antisocial behaviour back on the football? It gives football such a bad name, and it's only sometimes the minority that lead it and the rest follow.
Yeah, well, where do you think this is coming from? One viewer has been in touch this morning saying that they feel that there's a lot more aggression in society after the lockdown, and that's manifesting itself in some of these pitch invaders getting into confrontational situations with opposition managers and players. Why has it changed?
I think you're right. And let's be really clear here. There's been a lot of research now that says there's far more antisocial behaviour generally. This is not a football issue. This just happens to creep into football like it creeps into other sectors of society. But this is what we're trying to protect. We're trying to protect our game and our reputation. And some of these people who lead these invasions, they probably don't remember what it was like in the 70s and 80s. They don't remember the poor reputation we had across the world. And we've got to prevent this from happening again.
Well, let's bring in Chris, former Met police officer. Chris, when you're faced with a situation like that on the pitch that, as we've seen this week, can be dangerous, how do you police it?
It's very difficult, and I'd have to say that over the last couple of seasons, police generally have been very worried about the rise in football-related violence. One of the issues may well be cocaine. There's clear evidence now that cocaine is very prevalent at a lot of games. A lot of decent fans, the majority, are very unhappy about that. And cocaine and alcohol really does create a volatile mix, which police and stewards have to deal with. The lockdown, I think, has had something to do with it. But generally, there's this rise in antisocial behaviour relating to football. And some of it, and again, senior police officers are worried, is that what we're seeing now is not just the older hooligans, people in their 40s, 50s and 60s who've never been able to leave it alone, so to speak, but there's a younger generation, people in their teens that are causing this sort of problem, these sort of problems at football matches. And we've seen that in these ground invasions, these pitch invasions. They're very difficult to stop. Probably the biggest deterrent is going to be ground closure or partial ground closure, which puts the onus on those home supporters. You can't expect police and stewards to protect the whole of the surrounding area or the area surrounding the pitch. So very challenging times. And next season, really, I think it's going to be make or break. Are we going to go back to the bad old days, the 70s and 80s that I used to police and remember well, or will we sort of basically get back on the road to having football as a decent game enjoyed by many millions, including me?
Janie, let's get some perspective. We're nowhere near that, though, at the moment, are we? And some people have been using the word hooliganism, but while there have been some really uncomfortable situations on the pitch with fans invading this week, we're not talking about a systemic problem here.
No, I don't think we are looking at a systemic problem. However, it won't take long for it to get like that. You know, we've worked really hard over the last 20 years to make football a family game, you know, where women and children are comfortable going to the game. Nobody's going to be comfortable going to those situations that we're seeing now. And we really have to nip it in the bud. And I agree with my colleague here that, you know, you can't say it's all down to the police and the stewards. This has to stop. This has to be stopped properly. And I think sanctions are the way to stop it. Otherwise, we're going to get behind closed door situations again.
Yeah.
Let's just bring Chris back in, if that's OK. Earlier, if you were listening on the radio, we were showing some pictures of the fans, English fans, England fans, I should say, last summer before the Euros, where we caused absolute havoc outside the stadiums. How do you prevent behaviour like that?
You need good policing, and I take on board what you say. Things haven't really deteriorated to the extent we saw in the 70s and 80s, but let's be clear, when you get category C matches or C plus matches, the highest risk games, for example, if you've got Spurs and West Ham, Spurs and Arsenal, West Ham, Chelsea, hundreds of police officers are needed outside those grounds to keep rival groups apart, groups numbering hundreds. And if you didn't have the police there will be complete carnage. People will be badly hurt or worse. So the problem has never really left us, but we did seem to be on top of it. And as has just been said, the issue at Wembley for the Euro final was really a disaster, a security disaster, partially caused by the fact the police were on what we call ground assigned at 3:30 p.m. and the subsequent investigation said that was too late. The hooligans had taken over Wembley by that time, and it was a case of really salvaging something from the wreckage. So I think next season we really have got to be careful about where we go with our football for the majority of people, like myself, who love the game.
Janie, we talked about it earlier, and you said that, you know, there is a problem with this kind of post-lockdown release of aggression in society, but within the world of sport, why do we always have these kind of uncomfortable situations, mostly with football?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors here. One is football is our national sport. It's our biggest sport. There's more money in football than there is any other sport. It's the most watched on TV. So you've got a lot of factors there. The passion. People support their clubs with a passion over decades. And that's great. That's what we want in football. But that passion has to be channeled in a way that is appropriate. And the pictures we're seeing here are just not appropriate. And I do agree that actually lockdown has had a great effect on people. We know that. They're bursting at the seams to get out and to do normal things. And that is overspilling also of what normal looks like. They're letting off steam. But they just can't do it in this way in football, because otherwise they'll have no games to go to. It'll be quite clear.
You're giving it the red card. Janie, really appreciate your time this morning.
Sure.
Thank you so much. I had to get that one in there. Janie Frampton, former referee and FIFA instructor. Also Chris Hobbs joining us there. Thank you, Chris, a former Met police officer.